So, what an extraordinary evening, an extraordinary Israeli government in prospect. Let's get some analysis on this from both Israel and the United States. Eli Kowaz is joining us, a Middle East analyst from Tel Aviv. And from Washington, D.C., we're joined live by Dan Raviv, who's a columnist at Newsday. Thank you both. Eli, let me come to you first. Do you think this government, if it is formed, can survive very long?
I think there's a chance. And let me tell you why. I think you have a lot of people that are key to this government that don't want another election. Predominantly Mansour Abbas, and it really is historic, the fact that an Arab party is going to be part of an Israeli government, and Naftali Bennett as well, who as part of this coalition agreement will serve as prime minister. He is looking for new voters. He is looking to broaden his support. He was previously the darling of the Israeli right, but now a lot of Israelis on the right wing are up in arms at his decision to join this coalition. So he's looking to expand support among Israeli centrists. He wants this coalition to last, but at the same time, you have a lot of elements here that are not organic, natural partners, right? No one would have thought that Naftali Bennett, who just a few years ago was championing annexation of large parts of the West Bank, would join up with a party that has roots in the Islamic Brotherhood of the United Arab List, Ra'am, led by Mansour Abbas. So we'll have to see how things play out. But without Netanyahu in the picture, this is just a new era of Israeli politics. So it's exciting, and we'll all closely follow it.
We're just showing some pictures to our viewers of the two men actually phoning the president to say they've done the deal and they want to go forward from here. But, Dan Raviv, here's the thing. There's another few days to go yet. There's nearly 2 weeks of this thing to play out before it gets ratified. Do you sense that it could be a wobbly couple of weeks and that, who knows, Mr. Netanyahu may try and disrupt things?
Yes, of course, he will try. Your correspondent in Israel was quite correct. It's believed it will be 12 days until the Knesset or Parliament meets to approve this election, right? In effect, that's a vote of confidence or vote of no confidence, but it's really to approve this coalition. And so the anti-Netanyahu parties plan to hold fast. They have reached their deals. There were a lot of negotiations who gets certain ministries and certain jobs. Up to the very final hour today, there were members of Naftali Bennett's right-wing party, called simply Hayamina, the right, who didn't want to go along with the deal, but they've decided to. And that's right. That we have politicians now from the Arab minority in Israel. Keep in mind, more than 2 million citizens out of 9.5 million Israelis are Arabs. They're not Jewish, and they're being brought into a governing coalition. It will be fascinating, but Netanyahu isn't out of the picture. He vows to be a very active leader of the opposition. He'll try to bring down the government, and you're right, in the next 12 days, he'll try to prevent it from coming into existence at all.
Dan, back with you in just a second. Let me just play a little bit of this video, shall we? This is Yair Lapid and Naftali Bennett together on the phone to the Israeli president saying they've done the deal. Here we go.
שלום לך, ולידי יושב נפתלי בנט, יושב ראש ימינה. אדוני הנשיא, אני רוצה לך להגיד שעלה בידי להקים ממשלה עם סיעות יש עתיד, ימינה, כחול לבן, רע"מ, תקווה חדשה, מרץ ומפלגת העבודה, כולם ביחד, כולם חתמו לי, כולם הודיעו לי שעלה בידי מבחינתם, אז אני מצטער להודיע לך שעלה בידי להקים ממשלה.
The president has to say there, and they're literally having to share the phone handset, and we appreciate the conversation was in Hebrew. We'll get an English translation. Dan Raviv, let me come back to you then. US relations with Israel. I guess for the moment, the White House and, for that matter, the State Department just what? Sit back and watch?
Well, I think they'll be happy if Netanyahu really is gone. For 12 years as prime minister, a lot of friction with the United States. Netanyahu came here to Washington in 2015, and he gave a major speech saying why the U.S. should not enter that nuclear accord with Iran. That was considered by President Obama and his Vice President Joe Biden to be highly insulting. So I don't think Biden likes Netanyahu. He knows him very well. So I think the Biden administration will be glad if Netanyahu really is gone. And here's a coincidence. Tomorrow, The defense minister of Israel will be here to talk about getting some more military aid after the last Gaza war. Benny Gantz is himself the leader of one of the parties planning to join this coalition. That means that Biden and his top officials will have a chance to get a frank, behind closed door briefing on what is going on in Israel, because it's very dynamic and to many quite confusing, Mark.
Yeah, I should say that's something of an understatement, Dan. Back with you in a second. Eli, let me bring you back in on this. And of course, it is essential in any kind of overview of Israeli politics that the relationships with Palestinians, both in the West Bank, within Gaza, the recent conflict, we were reporting only a matter of days ago. How do you think, what's your first take on whether this improves or has a chance to improve relationships between the two sides?
It definitely has a chance, but it's not going to be easy. And that's because of the right-wing components of this coalition. That's because of Naftali Bennett and Yamina. That's because of Gideon Sa'ar and his New Hope party. And it's also because of Avigdor Lieberman's party, Israel Beitenu as well. These are all parties with very right-wing agendas when it comes to the Palestinians. But does that mean this will be a disaster for the Palestinians? Absolutely not, in my opinion. I think having a coalition that has Meretz, that has Ra'am, that has Labor, three parties that are for a two-state solution. Yesh Atid and Yair Lapid are also, they support a two-state solution. I think the best thing to hope for, at least in the near term, is for Israel to stop or at least to curb back settlement expansion deep inside of the West Bank, especially outside of what are considered the blocks in Israel. And I think also there's a real opportunity here to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza and to also strengthen the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. And I think this government can accomplish that, but it won't be easy.
Well, Dan Raviv, let me bring you on this question, this tricky question of the settlements and the expansion. Mansour Abbas must have got something out of these two leaders in order to join this coalition. Could it be something like that? Could it be a freeze on development?
Well, I think that's something he would have asked for. I don't think it's a promise he got, but two things to say. Mansour Abbas and the Ra'am party, the Arab party, which is joining the coalition, got an agreement for the Israeli government to be much more giving, much more liberal toward Bedouin Arabs who live in southern Israel. They've been having a hard time from authorities. And so I think he's doing a big favor for a lot of Arab voters there. In addition, however, because of what you've been hearing from Eli, this government will be so divided with all the parties from left to right that are there. I don't expect anything major to happen. Not for Israel to annex the West Bank that it captured in 1967 from Jordan, but also not for Israel to give up the West Bank. The main point of this new coalition is get rid of Netanyahu. His political opponents are hoping that he will be convicted in the trial that is underway, the trial of Netanyahu on fraud and bribery charges. For now, he will be a powerful figure, apparently out of government. But all that holds this government together is that it's not Benjamin Netanyahu.
Eli, just your take on that trial and the legal processes. Is Netanyahu more exposed now if he is not prime minister, if he just has to take that step back?
He definitely is, but he also won't go down without a fight. He'll use this last. Lapid will try to swear in this government right away, but he'll try to use this time to really try to fight for his life. He's also been in touch with both presidential candidates in Israel. Israel also held presidential election today, where Isaac Herzog, the former head of the Jewish Agency and also of the Zionist Union Party, is becoming Israel's next president. Netanyahu was also in talks with both candidates about some sort of pardon. But it will definitely be fascinating to see how Netanyahu maneuvers when he's at this position, a position of weakness, let's say. Whereas before he was bouncing from election to election, now he'll really, at least he can focus on his legal battle and put that have that as his priority and not running the country with that in mind. So I think that will be good for him in that sense.
Dan Raviv, is this a moment actually potentially of great risk for Israel? Because it's going to have this hybrid government, this most extraordinary, most broad coalition that we've ever conceived in Israel's history, I would be bold enough to suggest. And yet it's got threats, hasn't it, to the Israeli nation? It's got this troubled relationship with Iran. Is this a moment where a vulnerability could be exposed?
Yeah, this small country of fewer than 10 million people, right, feels itself small, surrounded in general by enemies. But, in the past year, they established diplomatic relations with some of the Sunni Arab countries, including the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. It's pretty much an open secret that there are polite, quiet, secret relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia. I'd say the Netanyahu period gave Israel a lot of advantages, but he turned off a lot of people in the United States, especially the liberals and the Democratic Party. President Joe Biden is in that party. So I think Israel, in fact, has more of an opportunity to repair a lot of damaged relations. The Israeli military, the Mossad, the spy agency, has a brand new director, but he's an insider who was in charge of operations against Iran for the past, 5 or 6 years, and his name is David Barnea. I think the Mossad and the military continue to be strong. And even though the government is very divided, it's going to stand together on issues like, if Hamas attacks from Gaza again, I'd expect Israel to pound Gaza again, Martin.
Oh, just let me get you to explain that, Dan. You think that actually you could see military action sooner rather than later, Dan?
Yeah, but my point of view is a rather strong one. It may or may not be shared by most of your viewers, in that Israel did not start that war. And in general, it's not in Israel's favor to have conflict with Gaza. It ends up often backfiring, as we saw. Hamas fired the rockets first. Israel pounded back very hard. Now, Netanyahu, in the midst of a post-election campaign to survive politically, pounded Gaza very hard. It could be that Israel would have more of a light touch, a little bit of a diplomatic touch, trying to keep its friendships around the world, whereas Netanyahu was trying to look super tough. So this isn't about blaming right now Palestinians or Israelis, just political realities that I expect this Israeli government to kind of find its feet, find its way. And if no one attacks Israel, then Israel's going to have some political rebuilding at home and with its friends around the world.
Eli Kowaz, let me bring you in back. You're speaking to us from Tel Aviv tonight. The Turkish foreign minister once again spoke of the two-state solution. We know a lot of international powers. The European Union has spoken about it. The British foreign minister has spoken about it. It's bound to come up very much more on the agenda, do you not think, if, as is now possible, this coalition government tries to find its feet?
It will definitely come up, and I think that will be an interesting indicator of where this coalition is headed. Naftali Bennett has been known to be in opposition and against a two-state solution, but he is changing. I mean, Netanyahu and previous Israeli prime ministers have switched their view on this question that really is at the core of Israel, and the only way Israel can be both a Jewish and democratic state is to move towards separation from the Palestinians, and that is in accordance with a two-state solution. So we'll have to see. We have parties here that are supporting a two-state solution. Yair Lapid, who is a proponent of a two-state solution, will be the foreign minister. Isaac Herzog will be the president. He is an outspoken supporter of the two-state solution. It is very clear from Antony Blinken's visit to the region and from what we've heard from the new U.S. administration that they are supporting a two-state solution. And it is back on the table, not in any one-state, two-state formula as we had during the Trump years. If Israel wants to rebuild these relationships that Dan mentioned, they are going to have to bring back the two-state solution and definitely start talking again to the Palestinians and especially the Palestinian Authority. We've seen years of Netanyahu really strengthening Hamas in ways, passing them millions of dollars in suitcases. This is going to be a different era, I think, in terms of how the Israeli government interacts with the Palestinians, both in Gaza and the West Bank. And I think working towards a two-state solution is critical. Again, it's not going to happen in the near term, but I think if the possibilities can be preserved for us to get towards that and to keep the viability for two states, that will be in Israel's interest, definitely, both internally and abroad.
Eli Kowaz, Dan Raviv. Gents, thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.